Hello, my name is Chandler Co. Brown, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the North Umpqua Trail, specifically the Tioga Bridge entrance. Let's begin with a brief history of the trail itself. And it all began in the early 1970s when some local trail advocates envisioned a trail extending from Rock Creek to the Cascades. Construction eventually began in 1978 and was finally completed in 1997. This was through the combined efforts of many volunteers, the Forest Service, Roseburg District of the Bureau of Land Management, and Douglas County Parks Department. This ended up being a 79-mile long trail. Now let's talk about the Tioga Bridge history specifically. In 1964, there was a historically massive flood that wiped out the bridge in its location before. And prior to that flood, there was a arch timber truss bridge that spanned the waters of the North Umpqua River, approximately 20 miles east of Roseburg, off Oregon Highway 138. The previous bridge was known locally as the Youngs Bay Bridge because it was associated with the Youngs Bay Lumber Company. And the piers, the concrete piers of the old bridge, survived the flood and stood alone in the river until this new bridge was eventually built. This new construction would open up additional access to the trail by splitting the previously longest 16-mile stretch of the North Umpqua Trail into two more manageable day hike segments. Then, in order to minimize impacts on the river as well as a severe cost-effective measure for building a new structure, the BLM and ODOT engineers undertook the design of this project. And then they hired a local contracting company, the Weekly Brothers Incorporated, to construct this new bridge. And it was completed in early 2013. The bridge was also made to pay homage to the old one, as can be seen in these two photos here, with the new bridge on the left and the old bridge on the right. You can definitely see a similarity, though they are not identical. I have several safety concerns with the Tioga Bridge. And to begin, during the winter months, this bridge becomes completely frozen over and is impossible to walk on without tripping and falling. And that is an obvious danger for falling off. In fact, during the first year that this was built, I came and visited during the winter months, and became a personal challenge of mine to try and cross the bridge without falling, and I was unable to succeed. And just below this bridge is, just downstream of it, is the Swiftwater Rapids, which are rated at a Class 5 on a scale of 1 to 6. Class 5 means that the rapids are extremely difficult and can be deadly. In fact, people have died trying to float the rapids in my lifetime. I'm going to be talking about the objectives of the North Umpqua Trail, and also going to be talking about the Umpqua National Forest and its objectives, because the trail is almost entirely within the Umpqua National Forest, and only a few parts go into the still publicly owned BLM lands. So the management practices and objectives for the trail will mimic those of the forest as a whole. These objectives can be largely boiled down to 3 objectives. The first, providing recreational sites such as campgrounds and, well, the trail itself. And in fact, the North Umpqua Trail splits off and intersects with many other trails. Second is fire suppression. The trail itself provides an absolutely amazing way for crews to navigate to and from fires. It has made firefighting there much easier. Then the main objective with the Umpqua National Forest is to keep it largely untouched. And the trail really does help with this by just giving people a path to follow without them wanting to branch off and do their own thing and eventually damaging a whole lot more of the forest than the trail does on its own. When it comes to the management practices of the North Umpqua Trail, I find it to be extremely unique. And this is because when it comes to the management of the trail, it can be completely defined as extremely indirect. The trail is largely there for people to do what they want with it. They are extremely limited restrictions on visitors. They can ride the mountain bikes, they can camp on the trail, they can ride the horses even. The only real restriction is there's no motorized vehicles allowed. And one thing that was extremely apparent was that the trail took every precaution to keep waterways undamaged. For every stream, no matter how small, some I noticed a bridge before I even noticed the stream. And there were very nice, well-constructed bridges built there. And this is to keep people from going stomping through the stream and potentially damaging the environment. And the same principle is applied to trail maintenance. It is a very, very nice, well-kept trail. And this could be a little bit biased compared to the rest of the trail, because where I was at was by far the most traveled spot on the trail. What I found most unusual, though, was that camping was allowed, but there were no campsites along the trail. Instead, it was oddly encouraged for people to build their own campsites off the trail. Overall, though, the trail is largely made to please the social side of things while minimizing the impact on the environment. The damage to the trail is surprisingly limited, and the surrounding environment too, which this came to a surprise to me because of the large levels of indirect management. They provide pamphlets and occasional signs that educate people on, hey, don't go off the trail. Don't damage the surrounding environment, and don't use motorized vehicles and damage the trail. And when walking the trail, I found absolutely no visible impact to nearby vegetation, and no broken off stems, no carvings into trees. I even failed to find a footprint off the trail. For a very short stretch, just right off the bridge, I found a considerable amount of evidence of damage caused to the trail from a motorized bike. So it's evident mostly to the larger than normal tire marks, so it definitely was not a mountain bike, and there are very large divots in the trail. And knowing that backpackers had to make their own campsites, I paid diligent attention to the surrounding area to find evidence of those campsites. Surprisingly, I didn't find any. This could potentially be due to the fact that, while a popular desire, there aren't actually many backpackers on that trail. But I do know there are at least some backpackers, and they are building their own campsites off the trail. I was just unable to find one that day. the Umpqua National Forest catches on fire once every couple of years, just like any other forest. It is unfortunately unavoidable, and you can find the scars left behind from these fires for the past all the way up and down the trail. It is extremely common. In fact, I would say, for my own estimate, I would say roughly 20% of the trail is burned land at this point. In fact, some fires from nearly 20 years ago are still almost completely unhealed. I used to live up towards the Tokadi Diamond Lake area, and I see the same exact scars from fires from before I was even there. And there was absolutely no noticeable change from my earliest memory. And the most recent fire to do large damage to the trail was the Umpqua North Complex in 2017, and this fire burned approximately 44,000 acres. Observed impacts on wildlife population. When hiking this trail, I observed a surprisingly large amount of critters during my hike. Unfortunately, I was not quick enough to snap a good photo of one. Then, the large animals, on the other hand, tend to stay farther back into the woods due to the large amount of human traffic along the river. And there is really no evidence of a lot of loss of wildlife habitat. The trail takes up little space, and there's nothing on that side of the river that takes up any space more than the trail does. It is entirely protected land. Satisfaction in crowding. Everyone I was able to talk to thoroughly enjoyed the trail, and especially the bridge. The bridge is by far the most visited entrance into the North Umpqua Trail, and that was why I had chosen it, to see if there would be any crowding. If it was going to happen at all, it was going to be here at this bridge. Then I hiked about 10 miles north of the Tioga Bridge, and I stumbled upon 3 very small groups of people. The first group was 2 people, the second group was 1, and the third group was 3. The last group I met were backpacking half the trail, and the other guys I met were just doing simple day hikes like me. And nobody felt crowded in the slightest. In fact, everybody I ran into was extremely eager to talk with me and anyone else that ran by. And this leads me to the conclusion that maybe more crowding on this trail would not be a bad thing for the social side of the management. It is absolutely shocking to me that the main trail in the Umpqua National Forest does not have any campgrounds. This seems to go against its main objective of keeping the forest largely undamaged. While I was sadly unable to investigate for myself, the map does have listed campsites along the trail. However, when talking to backpackers, they said that those trails do not actually exist. They may have at one point and was added onto the map and for some reason never taken off, but because I was not able to investigate myself, maybe the backpackers that I had spoken to were mistaken. Instead, it is fully allowed and even encouraged to build your own campsites off the trail. It just boggles my mind a little bit why this is the case, when if small campsites were added to the trail, the overall damage to the surrounding forest would be heavily minimized. When instead, if you have 5 people hiking the trail, and they all pass the same spot, they would all build separate campsites. When if you had a small campsite already built, they would all use that campsite along the way, not spreading out and damaging more land. And as mentioned earlier about my safety concerns with the Tioga Bridge, they either need to find a way to close it for the winter months or do something to keep it from freezing over before there's an accident. In fact, they need to figure out how to close the trail in general, especially that bridge, with it being the most popular entrance into the North Umpqua Trail because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Because at this point, there's officially, I want to say, 12 entrances into the North Umpqua Trail, and there's actually a lot more than that. And if they wanted to try to close the trail, they absolutely could not. And I feel like that needs to be better organized, and so that we can get to a point where, if need be, we can close the trail for something such as the COVID-19 pandemic. I just wanted to give a final thanks for sitting through my presentation. I do appreciate it, and I would also love any feedback you would be willing to give. Thank you very much.